Today I'm chatting to Ahmed. Now, Ahmed is from Syria and living in Lebanon at the moment. His IELTS journey is very impressive for two main reasons. Firstly, he was able to get 9s in listening and reading and an 8.5 in speaking. And the crazy thing is that he prepared completely alone. He didn't have a teacher or even a speaking partner to practice with. Also, the second reason why his score is so impressive is that it was the first time he sat the test, which is totally mind-blowing. In this interview, Ahmed gives us a very detailed analysis of his preparation and explains why he thinks being stubborn was his secret weapon for doing well in the IELTS test. Now, if you have a question for Ahmed, he has kindly agreed to take questions in the English Pro Tips Facebook group, and I'll put a link to that group in the description below. I hope you enjoy this interview and that it can help you in your own preparation for IELTS. Let's begin. So Ahmed, congratulations for your IELTS score. Could you tell us what was your score?
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a 9 in listening and reading, 7.5 in writing, and an 8.5 in speaking.
Right, very good. And so what's that overall? Is that an 8.5?
Yeah, correct.
Right. So it's an incredibly high score to achieve in IELTS. It's a score that I certainly don't see very regularly. How did you feel when you got that score?
Yeah, I was expecting this, but in the same time, a little bit like surprised
Mm.
because like it's very rare.
Yeah, it's an incredibly rare score to get. And why was it that you were, in a way, expecting to get such a high score?
Because like I did see this on the practice tests I took before the test. So, and I really worked hard to achieve this. So, yeah, I was pretty sure that the hard work would pay off in the end.
And it certainly did. And the amazing thing is, am I right in thinking this was the first time you did the IELTS test?
Yeah,
Right. And so was that something
it
that you
was,
were very sure about, that you wanted to do the test just once and do the best you possibly could?
yeah, because like I didn't have much time. So I really like wanted to work really hard and just like reach my potential on my first attempt and just forget everything about the test.
And so that's probably what you've done now. You got the score that you needed, and you've probably completely forgotten everything about IELTS.
Yeah, correct.
But if you don't mind, let me just take your memory back, and I'd love to find out a bit about your preparation for the
Yeah.
IELTS test. So an 8.5 in speaking is an incredibly high score to get in speaking. Could you tell me a little bit about your preparation?
Yeah, honestly, it was the most surprising score for me because like I knew that like I'm pretty good at speaking, but not an 8.5. So when I saw this, like I was really amazed. So I think that like the main point of my journey when it comes to speaking, I think it is only practice and being natural. So like on the test, I didn't use really complicated things. I only used the things I'm confident in using and things that I'm pretty sure about.
Mm.
So like I played it safe and yeah,
I think that's very good advice, because often you'll tend to use high level vocabulary in the test when you get asked difficult questions. And
yeah,
so, just like what you did there, you said, I played it safe. So, playing it safe is an idiom, but it's the right idiom to use in the context that you used it. So, in your case, you didn't go out of your way to use difficult language. you were being natural and answering the questions, and then as a result, you were using high level vocabulary accurately, right?
Yeah, right. I think that when you are practicing at home before the test, I think it's a good idea to push yourself out of your comfort zone and really try to use complex things that are a little bit impressive. But like in the test room, I think that like the most important thing is just to be normal and just use the things that you know well.
That's very good advice. And so, when you say before the test to push yourself, what do you mean?
Well, I mean that like when you learn a new word or a new grammatical structure, I think that when you're practicing at home, just try to use it multiple times just to familiarize yourself with the word or the structure or anything. So when you do this over and over and over again, like this just becomes second nature to you. And yeah, you can really use it confidently and without any effort.
And how did you practice? Did you have a teacher, or were you part of a online school, or did you practice primarily alone?
No, it was like 100% on my own. I just like brought some questions from the internet or from some books and just like recorded my answers and listened to them another time and corrected my mistakes and just did this like hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times, right? And when you say you recorded yourself, do you mean you took your phone and you recorded the audio, or did you actually film yourself answering these questions?
I think both. Like when I have time just to film myself, I did this. And when I had no time just to record myself, I only recorded myself.
And how did you correct yourself?
Well, I corrected the things that I know. Like, you know, when you are speaking, you might make some slips, like things that you actually know, but, you know, because you are speaking and you're nervous, you make some like careless mistakes. So I only corrected these and just left the things I didn't know.
Right, and that's very impressive to get an 8.5 in speaking, especially from completely through self-study completely. And then you actually got a band 9, so the highest possible score in both listening and reading. Could
Yeah.
you talk us through your preparation for listening and reading?
Yeah, I think that like these sections are similar in a way or another. Like listening, you just need to just like to make yourself familiar with different English accents. You know, you might be familiar with the American one, but there are some accents that might be a little bit tricky. So in my case, like the Australian and the British one were really hard in the beginning. So I listened to some podcasts in these accents, and they were really entertaining and beneficial. So yeah, I think that podcasts are a great tool to use when it comes to listening. And also, I used Cambridge books, the official ones, and just like to get used to the structure of the test and the types of questions asked. And when it comes to reading, I think it's like 70% the same. The only difference is that I read articles and books. So, like, whenever came across like a difficult word or anything I didn't know, I just like did a little bit of research on it and just like learned things that I didn't know.
Okay, lots of good advice there. So first of all, you said you listen to podcasts. Are there
Yeah.
any particular podcasts that you would recommend for people taking the IELTS test?
Okay, for the British accent, I recommend BBC's podcasts. So I'm interested in soccer, so I listen to the soccer one. There are so many of them, so you just need to choose the one that you are interested in. And when it comes to the Australian accent, I recommend the All in the Mind. It talks about psychology and things like that. So it was really interesting and beneficial. And actually, it allowed me to just collect some vocab and some ideas about this topic. And when it comes to the American one, I recommend the one called, I think, Science Diction. It's a great one. It just brings some words that are like widely used nowadays, like the word meme, and explains its history and how it was created. So yeah, I think that the main point is just to choose things you are interested in.
Yeah, that's very clever. So it wasn't like you were specifically listening to IELTS podcasts or podcasts for learning a language. You were interested in psychology and soccer and science. And so you listened to podcasts about those topics, but in English.
Yeah, exactly. I think that like your preparation shouldn't be like 100% focused on IELTS stuff because like firstly you might get bored like shortly, and another thing is that like IELTS lessons don't give you like all the things that you need on the test. You need to just broaden the things you know about English, and I think that like listening to general stuff is really beneficial.
And so would you kind of just passively listen to podcasts on your way to work or school, or would you intentionally listen to them, writing down new words or expressions that you like the sound of?
Well, like no, I would listen actively because like if you listen passively and you are not really sure of what you are listening to, you are not benefiting from it. You need just to listen, and if you didn't understand something, just like replay it and listen to it again so that you can just like practice. And I think that this is really beneficial. Passively listening to podcasts, I don't think that like it is really beneficial as actively listening to them.
And was your approach to reading quite similar? Did you find articles on things that interested you and then actively learn vocabulary and structures from those articles?
Yeah, exactly. But to be honest, like when I read something for the first time, I didn't focus on vocab, or I just focused on grasping the main topic or the main theme of the article. Because like this is the purpose of reading, not just like collecting some vocab and words and that's it. So I read like an article, some articles for the first time just to grasp the main idea, and then just reread them a second and a third time just to focus on the details.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. That's something that a lot of language teachers talk about regularly. They talk about reading for gist, which is reading for a general understanding of the article, and then afterwards reading for meaning, so to get a deeper understanding of what it is that you're reading, and then afterwards to read for the sake of learning specific language. And so it sounds like that's what you did, either consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah, it was a little bit unconsciously because like I didn't like read about learning languages. I just felt it that it is the natural way.
Mm. It certainly is the natural way, and it's definitely paid off. And then, so the final part of the test was the writing test, which was your lowest. It was 7.5, but that's still an incredibly high score. So
Yeah.
tell us about your preparation for the writing test.
Well, like it is hands down the most difficult one. Yeah, a lot of people just struggle with it. Like they score 9 on every section of the test except this. They get a 6.5 and they had to just retake the test just for this. So honestly, I focused like 60% of my preparation on writing. I just like used some books, some online courses, just for knowing the structure of the test, the different types of questions that are asked on the test, and just like practice using official materials. And then I didn't have feedback, unfortunately. So I just like left the piece of writing I wrote for 2 days or 3 days, then reread it a second time. And when I read, like figure out that I did something weird or did something wrong, I just corrected. And yeah,
Right. And so, so you would self-assess your own writing.
yeah.
Interesting. And would you do that with the public banned descriptors? Because that's something that you can download from the internet.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that these band descriptors for writing and speaking like are a must for every IELTS student. So you need to read them and to understand them. And if you don't have like a teacher or someone to assess you, just read them and try as much as you can to assess yourself using these.
Right. And so were the assessments that you gave of your writing a similar level? Did you think you would be around 7.5? Because obviously you hadn't really had a teacher or an IELTS examiner look over your writing.
So when I practiced, I didn't give myself a band, or a score, because like first of all, in order to avoid getting disappointed, because I'm not assessing myself as accurately as possible. So I only just like wrote the things I did wrong and just did some research online to correct these things. So like what I was doing when I was reading my essays and my reports, I was just asking myself, will the IELTS examiner understand what I've written? If the answer is yes, then I think like my writing is good, and just I have to carry on. But if the answer is no, I have to work on the mistakes I did when it comes to idea development and choosing the topic and things like that.
And so how would you work on something like idea development?
So like I just focused on developing the idea completely. So I imagined myself explaining maybe the idea of artificial intelligence to a person who is 5 years old. Would he understand what I've written? And that's it. So yeah.
Interesting, interesting. And so you said that 60% of your time was taken by revising or preparing for the IELTS writing test. Could you describe a typical studying day for your IELTS?
Well, I think that like my journey is a little bit different. So I prepared for the test over a year. So because I didn't have much time just to sit for 3 or 4 months and just focus of everything on IELTS. So I had like a little bit of time in the beginning. So like for example on weekends or when I have holidays or things like that, I would just like sit and study IELTS. But like 2 months before the test, I really focused on it. So every day I would do a complete practice test and without any breaks, without anything, just like the actual test. And then I will like correct my reading and listening mistakes and read my writing. So if I found something like I'm not really confident when it comes to it, I would just like study it and focus my time on it. So like yeah, it really depends on the day. But before the test, like some days I practice for 10 or 11 hours a day.
Right. And so, for example, if you found that you had a mistake in the listening test or the reading test, you wouldn't just, for example, write a cross next to it and move on. You would really try and find out why it was that you made that mistake.
Yeah, exactly. So I would write like why I chose this answer and what I should have done.
You would actually write that down. So it would be a very
Yeah,
conscious decision.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
And did you find that over the year that you were preparing for IELTS, did you find that because you were doing the preparation, even though it was quite scarce at the beginning, did you find that your English level also improved?
Definitely. Like I started at the level of 6 maybe or 6.5. So when I first read the IELTS articles, on the read, like those for reading, they were really like I didn't understand anything. Like most of the words I didn't know. So in the beginning, I didn't just focus on just solving a practice test. I just focused on maybe solving one a month, and just like knowing the nitty gritty about it, like everything.
Wow.
So I would translate some the vocab. I would like understand the structure of the test.
And I presume that you learned a lot of vocabulary through your reading and listening to podcasts.
Def-
Also saw that you recommend a website called osdic.com.
yeah.
So what is that? Why is that so useful?
So it's a collocations dictionary. So like in the band descriptors, it's like stated explicitly, like that the nine scorer or eight should have like a good uh, range of collocations. So it was actually recommended by Keith, the teacher on YouTube. So I just took his advice and just used this, and it was incredibly beneficial for me.
And so
So I
how
would
did you use
just
it?
so if I have like a word so I would read a writing question, an essay, and just like if it is about education, so I would bring some words related to education and type them in this dictionary, and it will give me all the collocations related to these words. And I would write them on a notebook and read it and practice it maybe once a week and use sentences on of my own and just like practice this.
And so, you've got so much good advice there. If you were to boil down your practice and your preparation for IELTS, what do you think was the one thing that helped you the most to get ready for IELTS?
Well, I think that to be stubborn. So in the beginning, like I think that it's the normal to face difficulties and to struggle. If you don't face this, I think that like there is something wrong in your preparation. So you need to push yourself, and when you realize that you are making mistakes, I think that you should have a positive mindset and just to remain dedicated because this is how we learn.
Absolutely great advice. All right, Ahmed, thank you very much. Lovely
Thank
chatting to you. Okay.